Hi, I'm Ethan, 35, and 2 weeks ago, I stood under a canopy of fairy lights in front of 80 relatives and gave away a vineyard. It was supposed to be the proudest night of my life. I'd spent 3 years restoring that land, 7 acres of rolling green just outside Sonoma, framed by cypress trees and sunsets that made even the jaded realtors pull over to stare. It used to be a dying orchard. Now it was a living postcard. I bought it as a thank you to my parents, the same to people who'd raised us poor but honest, who'd taught me that character mattered more than comfort, that a man's word should weigh more than his wallet. I believed them. I built my life around those words. Growing up, we didn't have vacations or birthday parties, just hand-me-downs, homemade cakes, and a dad who worked double shifts at a packaging plant while mom stretched coupons like origami. Our idea of luxury was when the power bill was paid before the reminder notice came. They never complained. Never once blamed the world for giving them less. My father used to say, "Son, dignity's the only thing that can't be repossessed." So when my company finally took off, a small but thriving logistics firm, I swore I'd give them something that felt like the reward they'd never asked for. A place where they could breathe. That vineyard became my obsession. Every payday, I funneled money into it instead of buying myself things I didn't need. I learned about irrigation, barrel aging, the right kind of soil pH. I even got the old farmhouse restored, right down to the cedar beams. When I finally handed them the deed, I wanted it to feel poetic, like a circle closing, the night of their anniversary party. I rented out the big oak pavilion behind the main house. Strings of light stretched from post to post, twinkling against the dusk. I even ordered a cake shaped like a wine bottle, because I thought irony was cute when you're gifting actual vines. Relatives filled every chair, cousins I hadn't seen since high school, uncles who suddenly remembered my number when the invitations went out. The air smelled like grilled rosemary chicken and nostalgia. I stood there in a tailored suit that still felt foreign on me, holding up an envelope, my hand trembling just enough to make the paper flicker in the breeze. "This," I said into the mic, voice shaking a little, "is for the people who taught me that money's just a tool and love is the labor that makes it worth using." Everyone clapped. Someone actually whistled. I turned toward my parents, Dad in his one good blazer, Mom glowing like she'd rehearsed this moment her whole life, and I handed her the deed. She smiled, eyes glossy, and whispered, "You didn't have to do this." "I did," I said. "You built me from nothing. Now I get to build something for you." Dad stood, trying to steady himself. I saw tears, real ones, cutting down his sunburned cheeks. He hugged me so hard I thought I might crack a rib. Then came the toast. Mom raised her glass, her diamond wedding ring catching the string light. "To my son," she said, "who made us proud, who proved that hard work and honesty still mean something." Everyone cheered. My chest felt too full for her. Then, still smiling, she added, "And now maybe your father can finally admit whose son he really raised." At first, people laughed, thought it was a joke. Then she didn't stop smiling, didn't blink. Dad's single quotes S hand, still on my shoulder, went cold. The room tilted, laughter stuttering into whispers. I looked at her, searching for the punchline that never came. "Mom," I said quietly, "what does that mean?" She just took another sip of champagne and said, "You're smart, Ethan. You'll figure it out." The band didn't know whether to start playing or pretend they'd lost power. My aunt coughed. My cousin dropped her phone. Dad's face turned the color of wet clay. That was the first moment I realized I'd just given away a vineyard and inherited a secret. The kind that didn't grow from the ground, but from silence. Asterisk after the toast, the night dissolved like sugar in water. People tried to carry on polite laughter, fake smiles, the band shifting into a too loud jazz number, but the air was thick with confusion. I could hear whispers floating through the tables like a current. What did she mean? Was that a joke? She's had champagne. Dad slipped outside without a word. Mom kept greeting guests, her face still lit up like nothing had happened. I stood there, smiling through my teeth, hugging people who congratulated me on the most beautiful gift. My hands felt like they belonged to someone else. When the crowd finally thinned, I found Mom by the dessert table, refilling her glass. "Mom," I said, quiet but sharp. "What was that?" She looked at me, almost amused. "Oh, don't be dramatic, sweetheart. I was just teasing." "Teasing?" I said. You dropped a bomb in the middle of my toast. Dad left. You called me not his son in front of half the family. Her smile wavered for the first time. I didn't say that. You're twisting my words. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I saw something behind her eyes, a flicker of guilt she couldn't blink away. Does he know? I asked. She set down her glass. This isn't the place. That told me everything. I left the party, my suit jacket forgotten on the chair, the deed folder still tucked under my arm. I found Dad sitting by the vineyard gate, shoulders hunched, staring into the rows of grapevines. The moonlight made the leaves look like silver coins scattered through dirt. Dad, I said, my throat tight. He didn't look up. You should have told me, he said. What are you talking about? That you knew. His voice cracked. I thought the vineyard was your way of forgiving her. I froze. Forgiving her? For what? He turned to me, and the look on his face, that combination of grief and disbelief, felt like watching a mountain crumble. Your mother. She had an affair, he said finally. Years ago. When you were little. The night tilted around me. I didn't want to believe it. He went on. She swore it was over before you were born. I tried to let it go. We moved on. Or I thought we did. Who? I managed. He rubbed his temples, shaking his head. Doesn't matter. He left town a long time ago. She said he never knew. I tried not to ask. My chest felt hollow. The vineyard lights blinked faintly behind us, flickering in the wind. Dad, I said, are you saying? He swallowed. I don't know, Ethan. I don't know anything anymore. He stood and walked past me, heading toward his truck. When he reached the gravel drive, he turned back. I raised you, he said quietly. I taught you everything I could. But maybe I wasn't the only one who did. The engine roared to life, and then he was gone. I stood there under that gate, the wood creaking in the wind, the stars blurring overhead. The vineyard stretched out in front of me, beautiful and cruel. The gift turned into a question I hadn't asked to inherit. I looked down at the deed still in my hand. My signature gleamed faintly in the moonlight. For the first time all night, the paper felt heavy. Like it belonged to someone else. The next morning, I drove into town and booked a DNA test. I didn't tell anyone. Not Dad, not Mom, not even my brother Matt, who called me that afternoon just to say, hey man, that speech was something. Mom's a little tipsy. Huh? I said, yeah, tipsy. He laughed, said he'd swing by to see the vineyard later in the week. After we hung up, I sat in the parking lot, test kit on the seat beside me, and realized I had no idea what I was hoping for, truth or denial, because either way, I was going to lose a father, and maybe find one I'd never asked to meet. The test results arrived exactly 9 days later. I didn't even open the envelope at first. It sat on my desk like a tiny coffin, the kind that didn't bury bodies, just versions of yourself you might never get back. That morning, I tried to distract myself with work. My company, the one that had started in my garage, now had an office, employees, responsibilities. But the numbers on the screen blurred together, and every email notification sounded like a heartbeat I didn't trust. By noon, I gave up pretending. I slit the envelope open with my house key. There it was, printed in polite, medical certainty, probability of paternity to 0%. It didn't even bother cushioning the blow. No inconclusive, no likely, just 0. The paper crinkled under my hand. I wasn't sure if I was breathing. I thought about every memory I'd ever had of my father teaching me how to throw a baseball, yelling when I crashed his old truck into a mailbox, hugging me at graduation. All of it felt suddenly borrowed. Not fake, just something that never belonged to me the way I thought it did. I drove straight to their house. The vineyard looked different in daylight, not magical anymore, just acres of work I didn't feel connected to. Dad's truck was in the driveway. Mom was on the porch, pruning potted roses like she was auditioning for a scene called Nothing's Wrong Here. When she saw the envelope in my hand, her face changed. Not shock, not guilt, just resignation. I told you not to dig, she said softly. And you knew I would, I said. Who is he? Her shears clicked shut. It was one mistake, Ethan. Apparently it wasn't a small one, I said. Who is he? She looked toward the vineyard, as if the name might be floating out there with the dust. His name was Charles. He owned the land we rented when we first moved here. Helped your father get a job in town. He was kind. I was young, lonely. Your dad was working nights. It wasn't supposed to happen. I stared at her. You've known my whole life. I told your father before you were born, she said. He said he wanted to raise you as his own. He said love mattered more than biology. And he did, Ethan. He did. My throat burned. Until you reminded him otherwise in front of 80 people. She flinched. I don't know why I said it. The champagne, maybe. Or seeing you up there, so proud. It felt like the past was laughing at me. I laughed a sharp, ugly. You ruined him to protect your guilt. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Do you know what you took from me? I said. That man taught me everything about decency, about hard work. He's the reason I gave you this vineyard. And now you've turned it into proof that none of it was real. Tears welled in her eyes. It was real, Ethan. Then why does it feel like a lie I paid for? I walked away before I said something I couldn't unsay. Dad wasn't home. His phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway, stammered. Useless. I got the results. I don't know what to say. You're still my dad. You always will be. No response. For 3 days, I didn't sleep. The Vineyard phone kept ringing, relatives calling to check in, reporters from a local magazine asking for follow-ups on the heartwarming gift story. Heartwarming. By the 4th day, I drove to the small church Dad used to volunteer at. He was there, fixing a broken pew, same old work boots, same flannel shirt. When he looked up and saw me, his face didn't harden. It just deflated. You got the results, he said quietly. I nodded. He wiped his hands on a rack. Guess that makes 2 of us who've been lied to, Dad. I'm sorry, don't call me that. The words hit harder than the paper ever could. He set down the rack, walked past me, and said, You built this vineyard for a man who doesn't exist. Ethan, maybe now you should figure out who you built yourself for. Then he left, boots crunching over gravel. That night, I sat in the empty tasting room, all reclaimed wood and empty glasses, and realized I had inherited the one thing my parents were always short on. Silence. I stayed there until the lights went out and the stars came up, staring at the vines stretching into darkness, somewhere between guilt and grief. A thought settled in. If love wasn't genetic, then maybe forgiveness didn't have to be either. But I didn't know who I was forgiving yet. I didn't go back to work for a week. The vineyard was quiet except for the hum of sprinklers and the rustle of wind through the vines. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe you. It just tells you there's no one left to talk. Mom called every morning. I let it ring. She texted once, Please don't hate me. It was a long time ago. I typed out a dozen replies. You ruined everything. You could have told me before I built you a shrine. You made him feel small in front of everyone, but deleted them all. Nothing felt big enough or clean enough. Then, 3 days in, a white envelope showed up in my mailbox with my father's handwriting on it. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Ethan, you don't owe me forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it if you gave it. I'm angry, but not at you. I think I'm angry at the years I spent pretending it didn't matter. I kept telling myself love would drown the doubt, but doubt floats. Always has. Don't sell the vineyard. It's good land. Keep it. Make it yours. Or I must have read it 50 times. He didn't call himself Dad. Didn't sign love. Just as if the man who'd raised me was slowly signing himself out of my life. I folded the letter back up, slipped it in my wallet, and drove straight to the county records office. The deed still had my parents' names listed as owners. That was the final straw. I hired a lawyer that same afternoon and transferred full ownership back to myself. Legally, morally, emotionally, I wanted it to be mine, not as revenge, not out of spite, just reclamation. If I was going to live with this truth, it needed its own roof. I spent that night in the old farmhouse, the one I'd renovated for them. Slept on the couch because I couldn't bring myself to use their bed. The air smelled faintly of lavender and sawdust. In the quiet, the memory of my father teaching me how to sand a beam played in my head, his calloused hand guiding mine, saying, You want smooth, not perfect. Perfect'll drive you mad. That line broke me, because he'd been smoothing over everything for decades, trying to make a life that looked unbroken. The next morning, I walked through the vines barefoot, dew soaking my cuffs. The soil was cool and damp, alive. For a second, I could almost feel what he must have felt building something that outlived his mistakes. I called him. Voicemail. I tried again the next day. Same. By the third attempt, I left a message. I read your letter. I'm keeping the vineyard, but not because of guilt. Because I still believe in the things you taught me. That love's a choice, not a bloodline. You can hate me if you need to, but I'm not changing the way I look at you. You're still the man who raised me, and that's worth more than DNA. Then I hung up before my voice broke. Later that week, my brother Matt showed up. He had that wary look people wear when they know they're stepping into emotional wreckage. Mom's been calling me nonstop, he said. She says Dad won't come home. He needs space, I said. She's losing it. You should see her. I've seen her, Matt, for 35 years. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. You don't have to hate her. I don't, I said. I just don't know her anymore. We stood in the doorway, two grown men staring at a vineyard neither of us had asked for. Matt finally said, So what now? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe I'll learn to make wine. He laughed softly. You don't even drink. Maybe I start. We both smiled a small, exhausted, real. That night, after he left, I went online and looked up local viticulture classes. It felt ridiculous, but also like the first honest thing I'd done in weeks. If this land was born from a lie, then I'd rebuild it with truth. My truth. And maybe, someday, my father's footsteps would find their way back down the gravel road. But if not, I'd still be here attending to vines that didn't care who planted them, only who showed up to keep them alive. 2 months passed before I saw him again. It happened on a Sunday morning, a kind of slow, gold-tinted day where the sky looks like it's still waking up. I was walking the lower vineyard rows, checking for frost burn, when I saw a familiar figure standing by the fence line. Dad. Same jacket, same boots. But he looked smaller somehow, like the air on him had forgotten to hold him up. He didn't move when I approached. Just kept staring at the vines. They look healthy, he said finally. They're stubborn, I replied. They keep growing no matter what happens. He nodded. Yes, they get that from you. We stood there in silence, two men with too many words between them, and no good way to start. I got your messages, he said. Didn't know what to say. You didn't have to say anything, I told him. You just had to come. He took a slow breath, eyes glinting like he was fighting between pride and pain. I keep thinking about that night. About her. About you. I know what the paper says, but I don't give a damn what it says. He turned toward me then, really looking at me. You're my son. Not because I raised you, not because I chose to, but because that's just who you are to me. Nothing can rewrite that. Something cracked open in my chest, relief and grief braided together. I didn't build this place to prove anything, I said quietly. I built it because I wanted you to have somewhere to rest, to stop working. You deserve that, even if the world flipped upside down. He smiled, a small one. You always did give too much. Yeah, well, I said. I got that from my real dad. That made him laugh, a short, broken sound that turned into a sigh. He reached out, hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. It wasn't dramatic. No swelling music, no perfect closure. Just a tired man holding his son, both of us trying to forgive the same woman for different reasons. We stood there for a long time until the breeze shifted and the vines rustled around us. Like applause too polite to interrupt, when he finally let go, he said, What about your mother? I looked toward the house in the distance, its windows catching sunlight like blinking eyes. She's coming by next week, I said, to sign the final paperwork. After that, she can come here if she wants, but she doesn't own it anymore. Neither of you do. It's mine now. He nodded slowly. That's fair. He looked like he wanted to say something else but didn't. Instead, he tipped his hat, an old habit from when I was a kid, and started walking back to his truck. Halfway down the road, he turned. You gonna rename it? I thought about that. The vineyard sign still read Harper Estate, the family name I'd carried all my life. His name. No, I said. I'm keeping it. But I might change the tagline. He grinned. To what? I smiled back. Something honest. That night, I stayed up repainting the wooden sign by the gate. The moonlight was bright enough to work by, and the brush shook only a little in my hand. When I finished, I stepped back and read the words out loud. Harper's estate built on truth, grown from love. It wasn't perfect, but it was smooth enough to live with. A week later, when Mom arrived to finalize the deed transfer, she saw the new sign and started to cry. She reached for me, but this time I didn't step back. I just stood there steady, while she whispered, "I don't deserve your kindness." I said, "Maybe not, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." After she left, I walked the property line, the late sunlight spilling over the hills. I thought about all the things that had been planted here, the vines, the lies, the promises, the people who tried and failed to love each other the right way. And for the first time, I felt peace, because the vineyard wasn't cursed ground anymore. It was reclaimed. It didn't matter whose blood ran through my veins. What mattered was who I decided to be. So I stayed pruning, watering, learning the names of the grapes I couldn't yet pronounce, one season at a time. By harvest, the first batch of wine was bottled. I labeled it myself, Legacy Blend. The tasting notes on the back read, forgiveness, oak, and a hint of honesty. I took a sip straight from the barrel. Bitter and beautiful all at once. And for the first time since that night under the fairy lights, it finally tasted like mine.